And welcome again to the Study Bible Study, where we study the Bible with study Bibles. And Revelation 17:14 tells us, "And these shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall conquer them, for he is Lord of lords, he is King of kings, and they who are with him are called and chosen and faithful." God bless and amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And welcome back to our study of the Communiste Manifesto. Now, Chapter 3, Socialist and Communist Literature Propaganda, as certain people in other countries might call it, or we might call it against other countries. Now, reactionary socialism, feudal socialism. Now, owing to their historical position, it became the vocation of the aristocracies of France and England to write pamphlets against modern bourgeois society. In the French Revolution of July 1830 and in the English Reformation agitation, these aristocracies again succumbed to the hateful upstart. Hence, thenceforth, a serious political contest was altogether out of the question. A literary battle alone remained possible, but even in the domain of literature, the old cries of Restoration period had become impossible. Now, in order to arouse sympathy, the aristocracy were obliged to lose sight, apparently, of their own interests and to formulate their indictment against the bourgeoisie in the interest of the exploited working class alone. Thus the aristocracy took their revenge by singing lampoons on their new master and whispering in his ear sinister prophecies of coming catastrophes. Now in this way arose feudal socialism, half lamentation, half lampoon, half echo of the past, half menace of the future. At times it is bitter, witty, and incisive criticism, striking the bourgeoisie to their very heart's core, but always ludicrous in its effects, to total incapacity to comprehend the march of modern history. The aristocracy, in order to rally the people to them, waved the proletarian alms bag in front of this banner, but the people, so often as it joined them, saw on their hindquarters the old feudal coat of arms and deserted with loud and irreverent laughter. Now, one section of the French legitimists in Young England exhibited this spectacle. Now, in pointing out that their mode of exploitation was different to that of the bourgeoisie, the feudalists forget that they exploited under circumstances and conditions that were quite different and that are now antiquated. In showing that under their rule the modern proletariat never existed, they forget that the modern bourgeoisie is the necessary offspring of their own form of society. Now, for the rest, so little do they conceal the reactionary character of their criticism that its chief accusation against the bourgeoisie amounts to this, that under the bourgeoisie regime, a class is being developed which is destined to cut up the root and the branch of the order of society. Now what do they upbraid the bourgeoisie with? It's so much with is not so much that it creates a proletariat as that it creates a revolutionary proletariat. In the political practice, therefore, they join in all coercive measures against the working class and in ordinary life. Despite their highfalutin phrases, they stood up to pick up the golden apples dropped from the tree of industry and to barter truth and love and honor for the traffic in wool, beetroot, sugar, and potato spirits. As if the parson has ever gone hand in hand with the landlord, so has the clerical socialism with feudal socialism. Nothing is easier than to give Christian asceticism a socialist ting. Has not Christianity declaimed against private property, against marriage, against the state? Has not Christianity declaimed against private property, against marriage, against the state? Has it not preached in the place of these charity and poverty, celibacy and mortification of the flesh, monastic life and mother church? Christian socialism is but the holy water with which the priest consecrates the heart burning of the aristocrat. Now, the feudal aristocracy was not the only class that was ruined by the bourgeoisie, not the only class whose conditions of existence pined and perished in the atmosphere of the modern bourgeoisie society. The medieval burgesses and the small peasant proprietors were the persecutors of the modern bourgeoisie. Now, in those countries, we are but little developed industrial and commercially. These two classes are still vegetate side by side with the rising bourgeoisie. Christian socialism, that's interesting. Now, in countries where modern civilization has become fully developed, a new class of petty bourgeoisie has been formed, fluctuating between proletariat and bourgeoisie, and ever renewing itself as a supplementary part of bourgeoisie society. Now, the individual members of this class, however, are being constantly hurled down into the proletariat by the action of competition and as modern industry develops. Now, even as they see the moment approaching when they will completely disappear as in independent sections of moral society, to be replaced in manufacturers, agriculture, and commerce by overlookers, bailiffs, and shopmen. In countries like France, where the peasants constitute far more than half the population, it was natural that the writers who sided with the proletariat against the bourgeoisie should use in their criticism of the bourgeoisie regime the oppressors, the people who are oppressing you. I'm guessing not what they'd say that, but they'd probably say it with an accent. Oh, les oppresseurs, les oppresseurs. Anyways, and from the standpoint of these intermediate classes, should take up the cudgels for the working class. And arose petty bourgeoisie socialism. Sismondi was the head of this school, not only in France but also in England. Now, the school of socialism dissected with great acuteness the contradictions in the conditions of moral production. It laid bare the hypocritical apologies of economists. It proved incontrovertibly the disastrous effects of machinery, the division of labor, the consecration of capital and the land in a few hands, overproduction and crisis. It pointed out the inevitable ruin of the petty bourgeoisie and peasant, the misery of the proletariat, the anarchy in production, the crying inequalities of the distribution of wealth, the industrial war of extermination between nations, the dissolution of old moral bonds, of the old family relations, of the old nationalities. In its positive aims, however, this form of socialism aspires either to the restoring of old means of production and exchange, and with them the old property relations and the old society, or to the cramping of modern means of production and of the exchange within the framework of the old property relations that have been and were bound to be exploded by those means. In either case, it is both reactionary and utopian. Its last words are corporate guilds for manufacture, patriarchal relations in agriculture. You know, it's interesting because there are a lot of people who talk about that when it comes to manufacturing. People who work in manufacturing, they refer to it as being in the police state, because they run a lot of those businesses as a police state. But ultimately, when stubborn historical facts had dispersed all intoxicating effects of self-deception, this form of socialism ended in a miserable fit of the blues. Now, socialist and communist literature of France, a literature that originated under the pressure of bourgeoisie and power and that was the expression of the struggle against this power was introduced into Germany at the time when the bourgeoisie in the country had just begun its contest with feudal absolutism. German philosophers would be philosophers and beaux esprits eagerly seized on this literature, only forgetting that these writings immigrated from France into Germany. French social conditions had not immigrated along with them. In contact with German social conditions, this French literature lost all its immediate practical significance and assumed a purely literary aspect. Thus, to the German philosophers of the 18th century, the demands of the First French Revolution were nothing more than the demands of practical reason. In general, the utterance of the will of revolutionary French bourgeoisie signified in their eyes the law of pure will, as it was bound to be. The true human will, generally the word of German literate, consisted solely in bringing the new French ideas into harmony with their ancient philosophical conscience, or rather in the annexing of the French ideas without deserting their own philosophical point of view. Now, this annexation took place in the same way which the foreign languages appropriated, namely by translation. It is well known how the monks wrote silly lives of the Catholic saints over the manuscripts on which the classical works of the ancient heathendom had been written. Now, the German literate reversed this process with the profane French literature. They wrote their philosophical nonsense beneath the French original, for instance, beneath the French criticism of the economic functions of money. They wrote alienation of humanity, and beneath the French criticism of the bourgeoisie state, they wrote dethronement of the category of the general, and so forth. So basically, whatever somebody writes something else completely opposite to contradict it, and they call it intelligence. And our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And this is our communism study. And Revelation 17:14 tells us, and these shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall conquer them. For he is Lord of lords, he is the King of kings, and they who are with him are called and chosen and faithful. God bless from the Study Bible study, where we study the Bible with study Bibles, and sometimes we read some other stuff.